Good morning and welcome to the Christ Central Devotional. We're in a series through the Gospel of Mark. I'm Alistair and I'm one of the group, and I'm going to be leading us through the first part of chapter 6. So let's see if I can get our scriptures up in front of us. Oh, stop doing that little commentary. There we go. So, chapter 6. Jesus left that part of the country, so he was just been for the last few chapters in Mark's Gospel down at the Sea of Galilee. But he now heads north, back to Nazareth, his hometown. So Jesus left that part of the country, returned with his disciples to Nazareth, his hometown. And the next Sabbath, he began teaching in the synagogue, and many who heard him were amazed. So, really interesting. Nazareth, a very small place, maximum population, about 500, probably smaller than that. Very close to one of the big Herodian palaces in its day, literally built during the time that Jesus was growing up, and possible that he was one of the people, he and his dad maybe, working on building the palace. That's where the money was, that's where a lot of employment was. He could have been there. What's very interesting from the archaeology is that Sepphoris, which was the place which Herod had built, was a very Greek and a very Roman place. Lots of stuff from the sort of Greek and Roman civilizations in the archaeology of that place. Nazareth, a couple of miles away, nothing. No Greek stuff, no Roman stuff, kind of off the grid. It's not even brought in by the people who live there and perhaps work in the outside. You get a picture of Nazareth as being quite simple, very Jewish, and devoted to the values that the Jewish people had, not mixing it with the Roman culture, not bringing Greek culture into it. These were the people of God on their home patch, doing their best to remain undisturbed from occupation and just cultural invasion. And Jesus is there clearly for a few days before the Sabbath, and he's with his 12. And if we were in Luke's Gospel, this would be the point where when Jesus is handed the scroll, he opens it to the scroll of Isaiah, and he reads about the year of the Lord's favour, and he's come to make the captives free, and, then sits down, and there's sort of, you could hear the pin drop. And this is Mark's version of exactly the same thing. Many who heard him were amazed. I'm going to focus on that word amazed, and we're going to see it again in a bit. But it's kind of what you want, we think, isn't it? You want people who have been hearing, because Jesus has turned up as a rabbi. Now, they may not have seen him as a rabbi before. He's turned up with disciples. He's a traveling rabbi. This is quite a common thing. But perhaps not for an ex-builder, because that's what Jesus would have been. And we'll see that in a moment. And they would have been talking about the stuff which had been going on down at the Sea of Galilee. They would have talked about, well, as much of it as Jesus had allowed them to, remembering that he's told them not to talk about certain things. So the people in the synagogue, they are amazed. So where does it go from here? Well, that if you have not seen the Chosen video stuff, which you can get to either via the VidAngel website, and this is a shameless advertisement, or through YouTube and search for The Chosen. This is a still from that TV series. You will find it really interesting. Let me encourage you to take a look. But these are very ordinary looking people. Jesus is a very ordinary looking person. and they've come back to hometown. So the people in the synagogue, they asked, where did he get all this wisdom and the power to perform such miracles? Which sounds good, but the response is then they scoffed. He's just a carpenter, the son of Mary, the brother of James, Joseph, Judas, and Simon, and his sisters live right here among us. And they were deeply offended and refused to believe him. Whoa, what just happened here? Had we been in Luke's gospel, as I think Nick was preaching on a couple of Sundays ago, it looked much more positive than this. Where did he get all his wisdom and the power to perform such miracles? It seems very likely there that they're referring to what they've heard rather than what they've seen. Because if they've seen, their response may be different to this. Because then they scoffed and go on to say, he's just a carpenter. The word carpenter that gets translated carpenter is a word that means worker. And it can mean a worker in wood, or it can mean a worker in stone. And around Nazareth, there's not a lot. Country, there isn't a lot of wood. A carpenter would have been a jobbing builder, work in wood, but would often work in stone. He was a builder, more than he was exclusively a carpenter. He did both. The son of Mary. Well, people can read things into this. Why wasn't he the son of Joseph in Mark's gospel? Is this a slight? Is this a sort of a pointing towards maybe that he was illegitimate? Is this a pointing obliquely towards the virgin birth? Or maybe it's reading too much into it. But if they are saying negative things, it's probably not a positive thing to say the son of Mary, when normally men were known as the sons of their fathers. And then the list of the family. And the brother of James, Joseph, Judas, Simon. They know the brothers. This is his hometown. He's fully known here. Or at least they think they fully know him. And his sisters, they live right here among us. So Jesus is rejected. They were deeply offended and refused to believe him. And here's the end of this passage for this morning. Then Jesus told them, a prophet is honoured everywhere, except in his own hometown and among his relatives and his own family. And because of their unbelief, he couldn't do any miracles among them. I mean, except place his hands on a few sick people and heal them. And he was amazed at their unbelief. Just running through this again, just to absorb it a little bit more before we get to pray. Jesus tells the proverb, if you like, that the prophet is honoured everywhere, except in his own town. That's the proverb. Proverb is honoured everywhere except in his own town. What's added here? And among his relatives and his own family. Jesus is exclusively flagging here that in the crowd of offended people are members of his own flesh and blood family. We have to let that sink in. The people that knew him the best have decided that he is beyond the pale. At this point, they are not on side. In Luke's gospel, the phrase comes, they come to take hold of him because he's out of his mind. And because of their unbelief, and it's not just his family at this point, just coming back to the passage, because of their unbelief, he couldn't do any miracles among them, which kind of makes the end of this sentence a little bit more difficult, except to place his hands on a few sick people and heal them, because to me that looks like a miracle. But Mark's quite specific. Nothing that Jesus does there is recognized as a miracle. He lays his hands on some people, they get well. Maybe they were going to get better anyway. I said I wanted to use the word amazed. We often think we want to do something amazing. We want our friends to see something amazing. When they see something amazing, they will believe. They see the miracles. If they hear what Jesus is really like, they will believe. Well, here Jesus is amazed. And it says at the beginning of the passage that the people were amazed. But their amazement led them to unbelief. And Jesus' amazement is that that's even possible. Brothers and sisters, that is even possible. It happened to Jesus in the flesh. When he was here, when he did what he did, when he said what he said, some people were amazed and responded. Others responded in unbelief. Even his own family. This is the state of the human heart. This is the challenge against which our witness and our evangelism is played out. And if we imagine it's harder for us here than it was for Jesus there, then I'm going to tell you, the human heart has not changed in 2,000 years. And we are called to the same thing that the disciples were back then, and Jesus was seeking to model. And even he ran into brick walls from time to time. So at that point, we're going to come to prayer. And I'd love us to be praying for the perseverance to keep going and to look for the opportunities for witness that there are in these days, especially if we scratch just below the surface in a time when people are increasingly struggling. Let's pray that we might see breakthrough, not like this, but like the sort of things that Jesus saw in other places where he was. Maybe the hometown was harder than anywhere else, but there are other places where he was rejected as well. And we will be. But we've got to be actually doing something to find out whether it will be amazement for a good reason or amazement and scoffing. Let's pray.